Hey everyone, checking in tonight with Tuesday's Natural Tips, and I wanted to continue our conversation as far as fermenting foods and show you one of the other things that I like to do around here. One of the other things that I do, we talked a few weeks ago about our fermented pickles. I also like to do fermented dairy. So I've done yogurt in the past, but I wasn't always pleased with the results, and it often required some updates as far as starter cultures, and it was just not what I wanted it to be. So I've started to do KEFAR or KEFAR. You'll hear it pronounced both ways, and you can do fermented milk KEFAR or water. I've done both. I have switched away from the water KEFAR. That's primarily sugar water that you're fermenting, and I'm now using just milk. So this is very similar to yogurt, probably a more thin, drinkable yogurt. You may see it in the stores in the organic or natural dairy aisle and see bottles, and they're often flavored with fruits and all kinds of great stuff. But I do this at home, and so much like yogurt, it does require a starter culture. In this case, it's not just bacteria, it is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So those different organisms are working together. There's often lactobacillus bacteria and a number of other species, and the species can vary with KEFAR and depending what cultures you get, and they can kind of vary with each ferment as well as far as what's going to predominate. Another big difference between KEFAR and yogurt is that it's not just a lyophilized or starter culture where you're using your previous ferment to seed the next one. In this case, we use what's called grains. So they're little kind of gelatinous guys that are our cultures, are again our combination of yeast and bacteria. So I kind of want to show you here my setup. So you can see here, this is a batch that I just finished fermenting, and you can see up here at the top we have the whey that has separated out, and as you look you can kind of tell where those grains are and where there's some thicker areas and where you have the liquid portion, and then down at the bottom we have all of our fermented milk. So after this culture is complete, I strain it out, and I strain those grains out, and I'll show you those here in a second. And then I have my finished product, and so I drink that almost every day. I take at least a spoonful. I sometimes make smoothies with it. I mix it with my Ningxia Red or all kinds of other things. So it's really great for a lot of different combinations. I also feed it to my dogs pretty frequently, and I give it to my chickens as a treat as well, so that they all get their probiotics and can improve their gut health. So here's our finished product. You can see pretty liquidy. Hopefully you guys can see that. So a little thicker than milk, but definitely thinner than yogurt. Again, drinkable, but definitely nice and ripe and sour. So I'll show you here, I pulled some grains out. So they still have some of the fermented product there, but you can kind of see, I don't know, maybe you can't see very well, but they're kind of little gelatinous globules. I tend to think they kind of look like cauliflower, maybe. The top part of the cauliflower florets. So you can look them up and see some better pictures on the internet, but they're kind of fun little gelatinous guys. You can eat those as well, and I've often thrown them in my smoothies and just kind of munched on them. Again, they're kind of chewy, but feed them to the dogs, the chickens again. And so I strain those guys out every time I make a batch, and then I use those to put into my next jar. So I always use glass jars for these ferments, and I like the 1.5 wide mouth mason jars. That makes them easy to clean. It definitely gets some film around the edges, and so it's nice to be able to get your hand down in there and scrub that out. The other things that I use here, and you guys saw my little scraper. I love these things. I have a million of them. Justin filled my stocking with them last Christmas because they're the best things ever. So these little silicone scrapers are great to help strain out. But I also use a nylon mesh strainer, and that's really important. You don't want to use metal with these organisms because that can really harm them and inhibit their fermenting power and kill them. So I never use metal spoons or utensils or strainers. And then I also use a canning funnel. So I'll just pop that on top of my clean jar with my strainer, put them on top of my jar, and then I pour my ferment in there and strain it out. So it's a pretty simple process. I'd love to show you guys step by step if you're more interested. And then one other thing I should mention. So I leave them out on the counter with these plastic lids tightened down so they can ferment. I usually do it for about 2 days. The timeline can vary depending on how warm it is and some of the atmospheric conditions, so that you kind of check it and see how it looks when it starts to solidify out. So usually 2 days will do it. But I love it. It's really great, and it's definitely acquired taste as far as the tartness, but if you like yogurt and other fermented products, it's probably something that you would enjoy. And my grains often do multiply, so if you guys are interested, I'd love to get you some, especially if you're close, that we can exchange and I can help you get started. All right, thanks everyone for joining me tonight.